Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me back there? Yes, good. Good afternoon, everybody. Is everybody excited to be here? Yeah, all right. Okay, well, this month, I'm very excited to be here because this month of April marks the one-year anniversary of Arizona's passage of their infamous anti-immigration law, SB 1070. Boo. But it also marks nearly the one-year anniversary of the activism that erupted on this campus, which, if you remember these shirts, was a great moment and something very exciting to be a part of, where we saw the solidarity develop across the country and on this campus between supporters of immigrants' rights and immigrant workers. Now, it's a year later. A lot has changed, but not much for the better. Let me give you a recap of how we are doing a year later. First of all, the DREAM Act, which permits children brought as undocumented minors by their parents to receive very important benefits like access to in-state university tuition and scholarships, thankfully passed in the House in December, which is great news, but it remains stalled in the Senate. Why? Well, a lot has to do with the sea change that has happened in the composition of Congress and in many state legislatures following the 2010 elections. Now, also I want to point out a few things for you guys to note. That in the first few months of 2011, we've seen the rise of a lot of anti-immigration bills being proposed right now or under consideration in many state legislatures. In Texas alone right now, there's 100+ immigration bills under consideration, and in the month of March, Georgia and Oklahoma discussed anti-immigration bills akin to the Arizona law. A lot of these include things that are familiar to us now thanks to the Arizona bill, things like giving local and state officials the authority to enforce immigration laws, and its effects of leading to criminalizing undocumented workers, to increase racial profiling, and to the detention of individuals without being charged of crimes, without due process of the law. But what does all of this continued anti-immigration climate have to do with Wisconsin? Now, I'm going to tell you that it has everything to do with it. The general message I want you to take from today is to know that what affects workers in Wisconsin is likewise linked with what affects immigrants, particularly the undocumented in the US. Now, let me start by unpacking a little bit of this concept that we're talking about, that this group of people are talking about, neoliberalism, particularly as it pertains to immigration. Now, neoliberalism has taken a lot of different shapes and forms in many different countries, but as scholars like David Harvey have pointed out to us, there's a little bit of an orthodoxy around which it concentrates. And this orthodoxy includes many things among this, including things like restraining public expenditures, celebrating virtues of individualism, competitiveness, and economic self-sufficiency, abolishing or weakening social programs, and the quote-unquote purging the system of obstacles to the functioning of free markets. But this orthodoxy also contains within it a paradox. This paradox is what links us with what's going on with immigration. And let me phrase this as a paradox of, on the one hand, economic openness, and on the other hand, this political closure. Let me talk about economic openness. We've seen since the 1990s the emergence of a lot of free trade policies seeking to liberalize markets that are making supposedly the borders fluid, but they're doing so for the movement of capital. Now, opening the borders by policies such as NAFTA has not only not helped the economy of developing countries, but it's lowered the wages of their workers and instead has fueled the increase in numbers of migrants to the US. And guess who's borne the disproportionate cost of neoliberalization in developing countries in the global south? The rural poor. Instead of the promise of jobs and prosperity, economic and political neoliberalization has meant increased poverty and hardship for families as they struggle to merely meet basic subsistence needs. Now, one of the responses to the poor seeking to subsist has been immigration to the US. And while we've had this, on the one hand, this logic of economic openness, the response has been a new politics of closure. Let me highlight a few things about this politics of closure, some things that may be familiar to you. On the one hand, we've seen the increased militarization of the border, the reconstitution of membership policies along this binary of citizens and aliens that's become such a part of our discourse today, and this simultaneous lax and selective enforcement of immigration policies, and something that ties us in with what's happening right now, which is the rescaling, turning the changing of the scale of immigration powers from the federal back to the local and the state. Now, this is a troubling compromise that is a compromise between these free market interests and these nationalist interests that importantly disavow how much the system has come to depend upon the labor of immigrants. Now, I only have about a minute left to speak, and I want to just leave you with a few things that, again, reiterate about the links between what's going on in Wisconsin and what's going on with immigration issues. Right now, we've seen things developed in Wisconsin be accompanied by the proposed, the proposal of an anti-immigration bill, which would be called LB 116 by Representative Don Pridemore, which has been circulating in Wisconsin right now. A bill that is very much akin to the Arizona bill. And again, it would require enforcement officials to determine a person's immigration status who is suspected of any civil violation without the due process of the law. Now, this is what's going on in Wisconsin. And what we've seen is that what's going on in Wisconsin is for migrant workers also seen as something that they see as very much linked. Something that didn't receive a lot of attention, media attention, was the amount of migrant workers that came out to support the Wisconsin protesters. As the executive secretary of the LA Federation of Workers, Maria Elena Durazno said, she said something precious is at stake, and it's about freedom. And as the director of Freedom Incorporated suggested, he said it's the same fight. First you go after immigrants, and now it's just workers. So I hope that what you can understand, given what's happening now in the first few months of 2011, and the rise in anti-immigration bills in places like Texas and Oklahoma, Georgia, and possibly in Wisconsin, is that indeed it's linked, and you should be alarmed. And that when we fight about the equal labor rights of workers, we should mean all workers, documented and undocumented alike. Thank you.